So when you open up Inkscape, you have this view, and one of the things that they're asked to look at is how to zoom in and out. And looking at the toolbar down the side here, we've got the zoom tool, and if I click on that tool, I now have it as my magnifying glass on the screen. The mouse has changed with a plus sign, and I can click to zoom in, and if I press on the shift key it changes to the minus and I can zoom out. So click once to zoom in with no pressing, and shift and click to go minus. The next part of it is to do a shape and to look at rounded corners. So we're going to create a rectangle, and I'm just going to change it up here. So I'm going to click on the sharp edges just to take it back to normal, so it's a straight one, which is what they will see first. Now you've got the different colours down the bottom, which you can change the colour inside, and then up the top right here, if I click on the stroke, I can change the stroke as well, which is the outline. So I'm just going to click on the middle. Now what you'll see is if I go back to my arrow at the top to select, you get the resizing. So I can resize my shape very easily, same as most software. You've got the corners taking the whole shape, or I can take it from the sides to do the height and the width. If I click on it again, I get the rotate, so now I can move it by just using the new handles on the outside. And if I click again, double click, sorry, I get the little arrows, the little square and the circle, and you'll notice I've gone from the select back down to the shape. So if you're on the select and you double click 3 times, it takes you back onto the square, and we've got those elements, those handles have changed. What you've got now is the difference. We've got the square and the circle. Now the circle is the one we want to adjust the rounded corners. So if I'm on that circle, click with my mouse and drag down, you can see that I am now changing the shape of the corners. So I'm putting a rounded edge on. Okay, so now we're going to look at doing the ellipse, which is a circle. So we're just going to click and move this down slightly, and I'm going to add in a circle, which is the ellipse. So I'll just notice that that's got the whole thing. So I'm just going to it's got a missing gap here from something I was doing before, which I'm going to show you. So I'm just going to click on up here to make it whole again, so you can see there. So what you've got this time is we've got a circle, and we want to change the colour. So what I had, I'm just going to close this up here a second, because this was the view we had before. But what I've got down here, right on the bottom right, if you can see, is like a window with like a bit of an edit tool, a paintbrush. So I'm just going to click that, which pulls out the fill and stroke section. And what we've got here are the options for filling in our circle, because that's what's selected. So I can select a specific colour from here. Obviously, as I showed before, we can use the bottom down here, but this way we can look at gradients. So we can set a gradient across that, as well as different options. So we've got the fill colour, and we can change and move along. You've also got the stroke paint, which again we can change the outline colour. So if I, for instance, want to have a red outline on that one, I can just change it here. And we've also got stroke styles as well. And these are the kind of things that are looked at as well in this lesson, so you're looking at the different aspects. So again, we can change it so we've got a dashed outline, and we can have a look at those different ones. And as you can see, there's lots of different options that they can play around with. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is adding in, so I'm just going to change that back to a full line just for this section. So we're going to have a go at creating a segment in our circle, which again is a bit like, it looks a bit like Pac-Man, so maybe we should change the colours, but I'll leave it as it is now. But what you've got here, again, we've got those handles, and we need the selected handles, so we need to be on the ellipse the same as before. But again, if you clicked on the arrow and then double clicked, you would go back to that ellipse. So there's different ways of doing it. But this time what we want to do is click on again the circle, but we want to drag it up, but keep your mouse on the outside of your circle to keep that opening segment. If I move my mouse inside the circle, you'll see it's a different effect and it doesn't work. So you have to keep your mouse on the outside, and I'm still pressing, I'm pressing and holding, and as I move that up and down I get the different segments open. Okay, now what you can see now at the top is that it has selected a change here, so it's switched to a slice. And what you've got now is, if I just click off that for a second and I go back onto my circle and create another circle, it's replicated that exactly the same. So it holds those settings of what you've done. If you wanted a circle that hadn't got those that segment out, again you just go up here and we click on the furthest right one, which makes it a whole ellipse, and I can change it back. So those are the aspects that fall under the circle section of using Inkscape with the Ellipse tool. And the only other things that are actually in the lesson 1 as part of this is to duplicate. So I'm just going to get rid of that, just delete that, and I just use delete on the keyboard, or you can right click and delete. So to duplicate I can, same as other software, is click on the tool, the shape that I want to duplicate, press Ctrl C and Ctrl V, and as you can see I get a duplicated version. Or I can right click on the shape, so click on the shape, right click, and you get all these options here as well. So we've got delete and you've got duplicate. You'll also see there's a shortcut there, Ctrl and D. So another shortcut, instead of Ctrl and copy and paste C and V, if I go Ctrl D, and I have now duplicated, and obviously it puts it right on top, so you have to move it out of the way. They look like lily pads at the moment. Okay, so in lesson 2 we're going to look at a few different options that we have here. So what the first one is about selecting more than one object. Again, it's like any other software. You click and drag around the shapes that you want to select and it will select both of them. You can click on one, press shift on the keyboard and click on another, and that allows you to select all the shapes that you want. If you then right click, you can group them the same again as other software. We have group down here. If I group them together, I've now got that as one shape, one image, one object that I can move around and reshape. Just going to undo that. So the other aspect that is looked at is one of the tools here. So if I click on this circle that looks like Pac-Man, if I just put that over the top of this shape for a second, and what I can do is select both of those shapes, and if I go up to path, and what they're asked to look at in this lesson is union, difference and intersection. So union puts the two shapes together, and combines it. So if I press union, you'll see that it puts them together, and it will take the colour from the bottom shape and use that as the dominant colour. So as you can see there, it's kind of combined those two objects, those two shapes together, and taken away the overlap. So if I undo that, again, if I select those two together and I go back up to path and go difference, this is going to take away that top shape and kind of cut it into the bottom shape. And then again, select the shapes, and intersection will just leave the overlap, so that one shape that's overlapped in between. So if you look at before, it would be the shape that is over the top of the square and gets rid of the top bit and then gets rid of the remainder of the square. Okay, so the other thing that it asks to look at is this align and distribute. Now it's open on mine at the moment. I'm just going to close it so you can see where to get it from. If you click on the arrow down here, you've got align and distribute, and when you click on it, it opens up that toolbar on the right hand side. And it is the same again like other software. It's aligning things where you want it on the canvas. And if you hover over each one of them, it tells you what that means. So align right edges of objects to the left edge of the anchor. So if I click that one, it will move it over. So all of these move them into different positions, and it's looking at them and seeing where they all move to. Within lesson 3, it starts to look at the nodes around the edge and how you could start adjusting and manipulating the paths. So if I go up to here and go to path, I've got object path, and if I click that and then I go to the tool over on the left, which is Edit Paths by Node. I can see the different nodes. Now, as you can see on here, you've got the little bits here, and you can see as I go across the top, the handles, over the top of the handles, my mouse is now different, isn't it? It's now like this little long, like, extended triangle. But as I click on one of those nodes, I can move it, and as you can see, it starts to manipulate that shape. So I can change it. And again, I can do that on any of the nodes and really start to manipulate that shape even further. Okay. Up the top here are all of the settings that they look at within lesson 3. So they look at how to add an additional node, how to take away a node, how to look at curved node shapes. So if you click on one of the nodes, shift click on the second node, I can then start adding in another node in the middle. And again, now I've got that. Now if I click on the curve, I can start adding in curves. And it's about how you manipulate and change those. So as you can see, there's lots of different ways of using it, and they have a good play around with that within that lesson. So as you can see, across the lessons within the Teach Computing curriculum, these are the areas that are covered in each lesson. So lesson 1 looks at that opening and setting up, zooming in and out, create and manipulate shapes, alter the height and width of a shape, adding those rounded corners, looking at the different shapes that are available, and also then looking at the how to change the shape by moving it, resizing it, rotating it, duplicating it and flipping it. Within lesson 2, they look at selecting multiple shapes, grouping, ungrouping, that align and distribute, and then looking at that combining shapes and doing the union, difference and intersection. And within lesson 3, they convert objects to paths, then strokes, freehand, and they're all, so it's a lot more manipulation on getting that freehand and editing the shapes that are created. Looking at those nodes, how to edit those nodes, insert, delete, making them smooth corners and making them straight. The remainder of the lessons do come into a project, so they start to look at what they will make, the vectors, and then they showcase at the end. So this is the part of the lesson 4, and it goes through what they're going to create, and it is a pair project. But as you can see, the worksheet that comes with it, so they are part of a website development team working on a website for a zoo to make the website more user friendly. The zoo would like to have icons on the navigation buttons, menu bars. So they've got the titles here, and they have to come up and create their own icons for it. Lesson 5 looks at vectors and rasters, and it really does look at spotting the difference and seeing how vector graphics are actually used and manipulated. And as you can see, it goes through the lessons. It starts to look at the shape, obviously that paths are used, that lines, shapes in vectors, and that pixels are used in rasters. So it looks at the difference here. It goes through those. It looks at scalability, because SVGs can easily be scaled. Whereas as you can see, it's not as easy there. And then it asks them to open up this SVG file. Now I have opened this ready, and what you've got is they're given this file. So this is given to you, and it's about what they want you to do. If I just go back to that, is you need to put the shapes together to create this image. So what they need to do is go through those, looking at these different parts and trying to manipulate it, looking at the layers, changing things around. So obviously first off we've got the blue, then potentially the purple and the black, so might want to send this one back. And obviously it's looking at how to move those around, how to set it up and put it in that same image. Now to move the layers around, you can actually use page up and page down on your keyboard. So as you can see, I'm page down, moving it right to the back, page up. So what I can do is page up to bring it forward, page down to send it to the back. So if I put it completely at the back, and then I can move it into position. Okay, now as far as I know, I think it's completely at the back. And then I can move these into position even more, and then start looking at the shapes of the fish, which obviously I can move around, and I might want to go back and look at the reference point of what comes next and build up my fish accordingly. Now it's just a matter of going backwards and forwards and seeing what goes where and finding those shapes and putting them into place and building that up. And now obviously I think that is it that one? No, that one goes further back. So I think it's that one there, and then we want to have part there. Again, just going backwards and forwards, building up those shapes, getting it right, and finding out where things go. Obviously we've got another couple of shapes here, so we've got the fins to add on. So that one's going to go down there. Got this one that goes, I think, about there, and that one that goes about there. So as you can see there, I've added in and created that using those shapes, and then obviously I can highlight all of that, and I can right click and I can group those together and now have one image that is easy to save. So that is the next lesson that they look at